need the video.
Hello, welcome to Technology and Innovation in Healthcare webinar in conjunction with the 13th National Conference for Clinical Research. My name is Aida. On behalf of the CREST team, I would like to share a few housekeeping for your information. The webinar will be 1.5 hours long, which will include a 1-hour panel discussion, a 20 minutes Q&A session, and a 10 minutes wrap-up. We invite your questions, so please key them into the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the panelists at any point, just type it in there and we will do our best to address it during the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and we will share a link with you after the webinar is over. We welcome you to revisit the content and share it with your colleagues. Thank you. So for today's CREST webinar, we are very pleased to have Mr. Stuart Beck, the founder and MD of Medical Opinion Asia. Originally from UK, Stuart has been in Malaysia for over 25 years. He has held several C-suite positions such as the COO of Subang Jaya Medical Center, CEO of Clinicals Hospital KL, and CEO of Prince Court Medical Center. Stuart is now managing his own company, Medical Opinion Asia, a digitally driven cyber health service supported by over 80 top medical specialists. With a keen interest in preventive healthcare, Stuart is also looking at medtech developments and application in healthcare delivery, developing the networking potential for maximizing digital data transfer management, and focusing on preventive healthcare IoT technologies. I would like to hand over to Stuart. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody, and for all of those who have tuned in this afternoon, we hope to give you a program which you will find most interesting from many different aspects covering COVID-19, what has been learned, what is still being learned, and of course what is going to be used in the future. This CREST webinar this afternoon is bringing together two panels. The first panel of 4 will present their topics. There will be a short break of about 15 minutes, followed by another 4 panelists, and then we will have some questions after that. We hope to make this interactive, as interesting as possible, but most importantly, there will be a lot of information that is going to be passed over to everyone. And we think there'll be many areas that will be covered within the COVID-19. For this afternoon, we have 2 panelists here with us in our studio here in the National Institute of Healthcare, and we have 2 speakers who will be online. Very quickly, I mentioned the 4 speakers that we have. Firstly, we have Dr. Kalai here from the Ministry of Health. We have Colonel Muhammad Ashil from the Ministry of Defense. Online from Korea, we have Professor Dr. Oga Gurel, and we have Ms. Nordina Idris, who will be here online, but here in Malaysia. These will be our 4 panelists for this first session. And I will give a fuller introduction to each of the panelists as we come on to the subject. So without further ado, let us go on to our first speaker, who will be Dr. Kalai. And let me just give you an introduction of Dr. Kalai, if I may. Dr. Kalai Arasu graduated with a BDS degree from the University of Malaya in 1985. He subsequently went to the UK, where he undertook postgraduate training at the Royal College or Royal London Hospital, and obtained his master's degree in children's dentistry from the University of London in 1992, and the fellowship in dentistry from the Royal College of Surgeons in England in 1993. He completed his CCST at the Barts and London Hospital and the intercollegiate membership in paediatric dentistry from the Royal College of Surgeons of England and Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Glasgow in 2001. He obtained the fellowship in dental surgery of RCSP Glasgow 2016 and RCS Edinburgh 2017. Dr. Kalai has published widely in index journals and authored chapters on cleft lip and palate in 3rd edition textbook of pediatric dentistry. He is an adjunct professor, Taylor School of Medicine, and Deputy Director, Institute for Clinical Research, NIH, Malaysia. Dr. Kalai this afternoon is certainly well equipped for the subject he's now going to talk on, and is very much focused on the role here within the Ministry of Health and some of the challenges that have been perhaps undertaken in one way or another to find solutions, but more importantly, to learn about what has actually been happening during this pandemic and COVID-19 here in Malaysia. So may I now therefore hand over to Dr. Kalai, and we look forward to hearing from you. Dr. Kalai.
Thank you so much for that, Stuart. And good afternoon to both our panelists who are online, Professor Organ Burrell and Dr. Roslinda at the Anodina. Right, this is a very important panel discussion, and it's a privilege for me to speak to you briefly on what has been happening in terms of innovation within the COVID-19 pandemic. If I may have my slides, please. As you know, when we started this discussion about this panel, one of those areas that we wanted to address was on healthcare innovation, policies and regulations that came together during this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, while we are on this subject, it is important to recognize Malaysia, as many other countries, we do have our own healthcare challenges. We have a burden of chronic health problems, multi-morbidity, our lifespan has increased. But at the same time, we need to address one of those issues about patient care. And in the last few months, you get followed on the developments that has been happening in the country. One of those main drivers behind this being our Deputy Director, our Director General, Dr. Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah, is to transform the healthcare system into something we call patient-centered care. And through that, some of those issues about high cost and burden, complexity of care can be brought down to a reasonable cost with excellent outcomes. Now, the background for these is to drive innovations and research. And COVID-19 was a good timing in which we could actually bring this innovation to the forefront. Now, at the Institute of Clinical Research, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were approached through many sources, both within the government and also from entrepreneurs, on some of those systems and applications that came into being for COVID-19 to maintain a certain degree of diagnosis, a certain system of patient tracking and management. So I'll just walk through some of those technologies. We had integrated data system to compile daily COVID-19 cases in terms of diagnosis and those who are under investigation. This was through the CPRC of the Ministry of Health. There were AI application for diagnostics from the use of chest X-ray, CT scan, facial recognition, voice recognition, and many others using AI to help in diagnosis. We were also challenged by several demands in the way we required PPE, for example, face shields, goggles, which required 3D printing, and as well as at the same time, we found there was a need to consider the use of 3D printing in ventilators, in the use of similar technology to facilitate breathing devices for those who are intubated. Now, the government, through the Ministry of Health, came through one of those most important acts, which is called My Sejahtera, basically for contact tracing. At the same time, we had application for robotics. One of the centers that actually ran through this particular robotics was in MIPS. There were this requirement for basic cleaning to delivery of products and tests to the patients and the healthcare workers, and also virtual platforms to manage COVID hospitals. And this came through, for example, through Microsoft. Now, I'm just going to touch on the My Sejahtera app because it embodies what the government of the day through the Ministry of Health and several other organizations, typically in this particular instance, the use of the National Security Council, as well as what we call as MAMPU, which is the Malaysian Administrative Modernization and Management Planning Unit, to facilitate this one particular application, which is to assist in the monitoring of the spread of COVID-19 in Malaysia. This was a nationwide effort. Now I'm just going to share this few slides. The data source comes from the CPRC and the courtesy of Dr. Fazila from Planning Division. In a nutshell, this particular slide shows us where we were in the way the MySejahtera app was developed. It was an 8-module app that not only looked at those in which required, to input their the data, but also to facilitate those who would encounter a screening requirement, be it at a facility, an office, or whether it is a business premise, so that data could become aggregated, and the MySejahtera app allowed that module to facilitate this tracing. Now, just to give an idea, by early June, the app usage hit almost 13 million users in the country. And just by mere check-in, about 250 people were detected for the purpose of COVID-19. And by home surveillance, over 38,000 people, 135 were detected. So the application saw it is being used very effectively. And by August, we found almost 14 million plus people had in fact registered in my app for MySejahtera, and over 12 million were there using it for the purpose of check-in and so on and so forth. Now, it shows that when the government initiates such a surveillance system, and where there is widespread what we call interagency involvement, and also discipline by the population to adhere to those kind of application, then such innovative technology becomes very useful. And in my opinion, during COVID-19, this is perhaps one of the most important things as a country we have found so useful in rolling out. So this would form some form of basis to perhaps later talk through why government involvement and policymakers need to come together for such application, particularly during COVID. So with that, I send back to you, Stuart, to give you a little brief on this, and perhaps later can catch up on some discussion on other applications. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kai, thank you very much indeed. And I think what we'll do is, there's one question I would like to put to you following your presentation, and we'll go for a wider discussion a little later on. MySejahtera is perhaps one of the focal points for the public to see what's going on with COVID-19. Are you able to monitor how much of the public are actually tuning into that, not just for using the app, but actually looking at the information that is on that app site? Because there's a lot of information there, but is the public actually picking up on that and learning about it?
I think the app allows monitoring through the Ministry of Health. Now, the Ministry of Health articulates aggregated data to our Director General of Health. So the app, in fact, serves a purpose. Now, for the purpose of COVID articulation and the conversation about disease status, it has become so important for a focal person. And in our situation, our Director General became a focal person for the articulation of such information. So the MySejahtera app for the Ministry of Health is a conduit in which data can be aggregated, analyzed, and information can be shared for a verified articulation of information. Now, I think that's very important, where you have consistent, accurate data. And that has become a practice in our country now, in which on a day-to-day basis, you foresee the public looking forward to this information. So although the app could be a source for such information, but I think the personal way of articulating that kind of information is much better in public sphere. That's, I think, my personal opinion. I'm sure many in the country would feel comfortable getting such information from authorized personalities. Yes.
Obviously, the app contains a lot of information. Are you still developing the app? Is this an exercise of continuing to develop?
There is a team behind this, and I think it has gone through an initial phase of trial. This was very much early after the discussion of developing the app in March and the trial phase in April. Now, the data that has been aggregated now is very reliable, but as we find that there is new applications, And within the module, such applications have become activated. So in terms of refining those kind of areas, yes, certainly there will be ongoing work, because as we see, the penetration is very high. So it has become a very useful tool to maintain a contact with the public, and also public have the ability to communicate back. So it will require further development. Certainly when you see new classes developing, then the way the app can be modified accordingly becomes very useful. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think this is very interesting to see how these developments are being put together at the moment and continuing to be developed as we move along. We will come to some open questions a little bit later on, but for now we'd like to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker who is here with us is Colonel Dr. Mohammed Ashel. If we could just put his CV up on the screen, and then I'd like to give his introduction. Colonel Dr. Mohammed Ashel graduated from the International Islamic University, Malaysia in 2003. Joined the Malaysian Army from the Ministry of Health at the end of 2004, obtained a Master's in Public Health, Clinical Epidemiology from the University of Sydney in 2009, and a Doctor of Philosophy from UPM in 2016. Was also trained in Underwater Medicine in Australia, Operational Medicine, ISAF, and Diploma in Family Medicine, AFPM. Attended various military tactic courses and served in Aceh Tsunami in 2004, Western Sahara, Mauritania, Algeria, East Timor, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Taliban, and Typhoon Relief and Cox's Bazar. Bangladesh as the Chief Planner and Technical Advisor, and later as the Commander of the Malaysian Field Hospital for Rohingya Refugees Mission. Patent holder for two field water treatment systems, and have obtained many local and international awards for his work on field water treatment and health-related HADR missions. He was recently the Key Liaison Officer for MAFHS in CPCRC, and I'm sure, Colonel, you can just explain a little bit about these notations shortly. And later as a Deputy Director, Pusat Quarantine dan Rawatan COVID-19 MAPS, where the use of innovative technologies were being employed under his purview. Well, I'm sure you can see Colonel is well experienced in many areas of medicine, not only here in Malaysia, but around the world in relief work. And I think would make a wonderful speaker for this afternoon of what has been learned from his point of view from COVID-19. So Colonel, if I may now hand over to you, and we look forward to hearing of your presentation.
Thank you, Stuart, and good day to all panelists. MAFHS is Malaysian Armed Forces Health Services, for your information. And CPRC is our CPRC in CKM, MOH. So I was attached to CPRC for about a month before I was redeployed to become the Deputy Director of the Low Risk COVID Treatment Center in MIPES, Serdang.
Thank you.
The focus of my presentation today is more on the practical part of it. And in order to shape the future of healthcare innovation, to create an optimized environment for us to practice healthcare innovation in healthcare, we need to understand what are the issues, problems, challenges, which might hamper us from achieving that status. And at the same time, I will also discuss some potential solutions which we may consider in order for us to achieve an optimized environment for healthcare innovation in the future. The first issue that we have identified is that most often in Malaysian healthcare system, or be it in any government agencies, there is no inclusive participation with regards to any innovative initiative or innovative projects. Most often it is exclusive to the very selected few, and it's most often run as an ad hoc project, usually for the purpose of entering innovation competition in and outside the country. And usually only certain department units or institutes within healthcare environment were being involved, and not those from from the grassroots, from the units, from the clinic kesihatan, from the districts, up to the state and all the way to the strategic management level. It does not involve everyone. So this is the main issue that we have identified with regards to the innovative culture and practice inside our mission healthcare system. Second issue is that there is no incentive system in place. You know that when there is no reward, there is no motivation. Of course, we always talk about giving back to our country, institution, without asking for any favor or looking for any rewards. But an incentive is different. In university in Malaysia, there is an incentive-based system in which if you bring in money or if you save some money for the agency, you will be rewarded accordingly based on certain percentage agreed upon between the universities and the researchers. This is almost non-existent within our government setup. The third issue is that we know that with regards to new ideas, new innovations and all that, there are too many red tapes in our health governance. There is almost no or little or no flexibility when it comes to new ideas or new innovative approach. And I would say that flexibility in terms of healthcare policy and practice is very much needed as long as it does not compromise patient safety. So this is very important for us to address. And issue number 4, which is the most pressing issue, we have lack of, or we only have selective funding when it comes to innovative projects. Any innovation or any new ideas requires funding. And most often the funding is either centered in the headquarters or any some selected institutes like NIH, some goes to Malaysian Health Promotion Board and whatnot. And there is no dedicated funding per se within the healthcare system itself. I give example, if you are in a clinic kesihatan or in district hospitals or in district health office, you do not have dedicated budget for innovation. And this will hamper progress with regards to this. Even if it is there, it is very selective in terms of its disbursement to any very few specific institutes and departments. So what are the solutions that is needed for us to go forward? We need to create an environment for an inclusive participation, of course, policy at strategic level to create environment conducive enough for innovation to take place. It should involve everyone, from smaller units all the way to the strategic management level, and a performance based or in the form of KPI should be instituted. And those who engage in innovation or innovative initiative should be rewarded accordingly. Solution number 2, as I said, we need to create an official incentive system, create it as part of the KPI, and those who save money or those who bring in money through commercialization, those who bring maximum impact should be rewarded accordingly through an official incentive-based system. This will push more people to do or run more innovative projects. Solution number 3, of course, cut the red tapes without compromising the patient safety. Just make it easy for all. Don't make it difficult for all of us. The last solution, it is important that any innovative approach that we plan in the future should be guided by the domains of quality. And this is the RCP, or Royal College of Physicians Domains of Quality, which I have adapted from there. And I would like to highlight on the 3 most important domains. The first domain is sustainability and feasibility of the innovative projects. You need to have a steady and dedicated funding. You need to have a very comprehensive support system, and of course a merit-based system, as what I have mentioned, for it to be sustainable and feasible in long run. It needs to be acceptable to both the healthcare workers as well as patients. Sometimes we are doing things which we think suits everyone's best, of everyone's interest, but actually the mass public are not accepting it well. So it is very important to assess the acceptability part of this. And of course, equity is very important. And last but not least, whatever we plan for should be effective and impactful for it to be sustainable and important in our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Colonel. And you've posed some very interesting questions there, and you've given your solutions as well. Can I just ask, do you feel that we are progressing, therefore, in some of those solutions that you've just highlighted?
Yes, but pretty slow in terms of the progression. I would say that in terms of funding, it is still very centered to some selected institutions and departments. It is not widespread. The coverage is very minimal with regards to that. Even in certain ministries, like in Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Health, we do have this problem of getting fundings. With regards to the red tapes, it's still there. Rigidity and inflexibility to some extent is still very much alive in the institutions, and this needs to be addressed for us to progress forward.
A very direct question. Are you optimistic? Do you see that we're moving forward and we're going to see
Yes, thanks to COVID-19. This My Suggestor application, for example, was mooted a few years back, but it kick-started because of COVID-19. During COVID-19, people see and look at technology and innovation as the way to go to solve the main issues and problems that we are facing during COVID-19. There are no other ways around it. You need to move forward, you need to innovate and adapt new things in order for you to overcome all the obstacles that we are having and facing during COVID-19. So yes, I am very optimistic.
That's good. You've mentioned systems, policies, procedures. One thing you've not mentioned are champions. System changes need champions. Do you see that there are champions emerging out of this, the people who can actually drive this because they personally want to drive this?
For me, the strategic level, decision makers, first of all, we need to come up with the decision. And the drive in Malaysia comes from the top. So it has always been like that. It is very unusual for those from the bottom, from subordinates or what, to come up with certain ideas, and if without getting the endorsement and support of the top policy makers, it is almost impossible, virtually impossible. So for me, the drive of this should come from the top. So that is Malaysia and how things are done currently.
But you would agree there needs to be some visible champions?
Of course, all the stakeholders involved, not only the government agencies, NGOs, private sectors, public-private partnerships should be in place for this to move forward.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Kelly, is there anything you would like to ask Colonel at this stage before we move on to our next speaker?
I'm quite aware of some of those issues that he has highlighted. He pointed out about the pathway to get research funding or funding for innovative thing takes through several processes. And he's right in that sense that sometimes dedicated funding for innovative ideas often not protected per idea. But on the other side, there are agencies that do fund. And one of the problems I think he very well mentioned is that the interagency and the engagement where the funding mechanism exists and the practitioners who are able to innovate, I think in the structural form, the engagement has its gaps. And so you find that there could be funders and there are those who can innovate, but the environment in which this can be facilitated sometimes is a bit vague. So you do have innovators who have to knock on doors, which is a difficult issue for some. At the same time, funders are as desperate sometimes to see where the takers. So we have this, what we call dark spots to address. And he does mention that in a manner that people need to understand that there are government, what we call systems in place, because we work on a budget that comes from an operating system and a system that pays for something. And on the issue of what we call incentivizing an innovator. Now, again, there are, as a civil servant, you have your own obligation to your employer, being your government of the day and the civil service. But at the same time, you need to figure out how you could be an entrepreneur with a way to incentivize back in the way that you can bring in the income. So again, there are challenges here because of IP, the legality behind it, IP, ownership of the IP while you're being employed. These are areas to be resolved. So I think there are innovators who struggle through this pathway. And within a university system, of course, it is a statutory system. Within a statutory system, some of those issues that he's highlighted has its own facilitation. And some of those universities are, of course, driving IPs and to innovate because it gives traction for having higher level of education and grants. So within the whole framework, it is difficult to envisage as a country, but within some of the systems, they have well leveled these issues. Yeah, that's the thing. Perhaps later when we listen to the other panelists, we could have more conversation on this. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Well, as you can see, we're getting into a subject which is very deep and very broad as well. And the perspectives that are coming out already are going to raise a number of questions in many levels. So let us now go on to our next presenter. Our next presenter, by the way, is coming all the way from Korea. I hope Dr. Hogan, you're there. Professor Hogan, are you online?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, I believe
yes,
he
I am.
Wonderful, nice to see you and welcome.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Dr. Hogan Gurul holds an academic appointment as a visiting professor at the Seoul-Ridge International School of Business and visiting teaching professor at DJIST, the Daegu Gyeongbuk Institute of Science and Technology in Korea, of course, with previous DJIST positions as vice chair and distinguished invited professor in the management of innovation programs. In the innovation world, Dr. Gurul is also Chief Strategy Officer at CT Cells, Chief Marketing Officer for Eyewear, SoundMind in Seoul, advisor for CREST, Malaysian Digital Health Cluster, and a venture partner at the Yosma Group, with previous executive roles as Chief Scientific Officer for FRT, Field Robot Technology that is, CEO at Novum Waves in Seoul, Acting Chief Medical Officer at Nessa Hearing, Singapore, and advisor at Frasen in Seoul. Dr. Gurul's over 35 years of experience spans multiple sectors: biomedical science, clinical medicine, strategy consulting, marketing, business development, executive management, marketing, and R&D management, with domain expertise in medical devices, digital healthcare, healthcare IT, molecular biophysics, and medical imaging. Well, as you can see, Professor has also a huge background of experience and knowledge, and obviously for this webinar this afternoon will add tremendous value to the discussion. So with that, may I now hand over to you, Professor Hogan, and we look forward to listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Pak. Always a pleasure to have your gracious moderation. And I thank you for the kind introduction. It's great to see Dr. Kalai again and appreciate the innovations that he's doing. And also the Colonel, I was very impressed with his breakdown of the impediments of innovation. In fact, as you noted, Mr. Pak, I teach a lot about innovation. I'm a student of innovation, and some of my introductory comments today will relate to that. So I will share the screen now, if that's okay. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, we can see that from this side.
Great. So Mr. Pak, you had asked me to address 3 questions that relate to innovation more generally. And those 3 are becoming better partners, spreading innovation through partnerships and collaboration with industry players. As you know, CREST plays a major role in that, and I'll frame this more widely in terms of ways to foster innovation. The Colonel was also talking about inclusiveness in innovation and engaging more people. And I think that was a very important point, and I will touch upon that. The second question was, what adaptations are required to render good practices in more advanced countries suitable for emerging and developing economies? And I'll address this type of relationship when it comes to innovation. And then striking the right balance between technology transfer and national innovation. So these are the three questions, Mr. Pak, you had asked me to address, and I'll talk about that in the next few minutes. So with regards to question number one, becoming better partners, spreading innovation through partnerships and collaboration with industry players, I think most of you recognize this person here. That's indeed Leonardo da Vinci. And I want to ask, since this is a panel, a question to the participants. I don't think everybody can answer. We have 367 participants, but I'm going to ask this question. Was Leonardo da Vinci one of the most innovative people of all time? One of the most innovative persons of all time? So if you go to the chat room, people can, all panelists in it. So I see yes, yes, yes. I see a lot of yeses. I would say Steve Jobs. I think so. I see a lot of yeses. I'm not going to wait for all 300 people to respond, but I think it looks like most of the answers are yes. So guess what? You know, I study innovation. I talk about innovation. And one thing about innovation is to do things differently. So my answer to this question is actually no. Leonardo da Vinci was not one of the most innovative people of all time. So let's address why that's the case. So I think it's very important to understand what innovation is. People often confuse innovation with invention, which is related to creativity. Creativity is thinking up new things, but innovation is actually doing new things. In other words, making it into reality. And as you know, Leonardo da Vinci had some incredible ideas, and he had flying machines, all sorts of weapons, and all sorts of other inventions. But in his lifetime, almost none of them became reality. And hence, on that basis, you can say he was not that innovative. He was certainly perhaps one of the most creative and inventive persons of all time. But I think there are many other people who can qualify as being the most innovative. In fact, the question about people being innovative is quite pertinent to this. So what is invention? Invention refers to the discovery or creation of a new idea. That's what Leonardo da Vinci was very good at. It is usually the work of an individual, genius, a brilliant person, and invention is by definition outside of reality. On the other hand, innovation refers to the combination of inventions or institution of processes around the core invention. It could even be old ideas combined in new ways. And innovation is typically the work of groups, not individuals. Hence, the Colonel's point about inclusiveness is extremely important, engaging multiple people to bring this together. The creative people, the marketing people, the commercialization, etc. If you look at a lot of startups, such as Microsoft with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, if you look at Apple with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, you look at Google with Sergey Brin, and I forget the other name, but there were often multiple people involved with multiple talents to make this into reality. And so by definition, innovation takes invention into reality. So innovation is the confluence of what is desirable to users, what is possible with technology, what is viable in the marketplace. Most people focus on this, what is possible with technology, but we have to consider, as the previous panelists alluded to the wider picture of how those new ideas actually get into practice. So I wanted to give an example just to make this a little less academic, as it were. The IBM PC. Most people may look at IBM as somewhat boring, big company, but this IBM PC from the early 1980s was one of the most innovative products of all time. And what was interesting about the IBM PC, IBM was very well known for inventing new things. They invented the hard drive, various chips, and so forth. They have Nobel Prizes in their research team, but their instructions were not to invent anything new. They were to combine off-the-shelf products. So that was the Intel microprocessor, and of course the Microsoft operating system and other off-the-shelf items, bring them together and make it into reality. And that was the innovation. So the second question, Stuart, what adaptations are required to render good practices from advanced countries to emerging and developing economies? My background is from the United States. I was educated at Harvard. I got my MD at Columbia. I'm in that sort of framework, but I would say that the American sort of academic medical idea, while we often seek that as a benchmark or as the high standard, and this is not specific to America, but I'll explain, is not necessarily the standard for current developing countries now. So let me give a quick history of our academic sort of current medical paradigm. So this is a famous painting at the Ether Dome in the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston with the Harvard Medical School, the first application of anesthesia in 1846 actually. This is Thomas Eakins, the Gross Clinic. He was a very famous doctor in Pennsylvania. And this sort of indicates the beginnings of scientific medicine and the transformation of medicine into a scientific inquiry where we focus on single variables, focus on laboratory results, and so forth. This period of time in the 1950s and 60s, the expansion of academic medicine, which defines our medicine today, coincided with the baby boom or the very high degree of young people in the population in the United States. Young people get acute illnesses, they don't have chronic diseases, they get sick, they go to the hospital, they get better, and they go out. So my point is that all of this has built up a kind of paradigm. This is the Harvard medical area with very famous hospitals. This is the epitome of medicine, but this type of medicine is not necessarily attuned to the needs currently with elderly populations, with low resource situations, with chronic diseases. And also we now have new technologies that can bring in more data, such as AI and so forth. So one important concept to keep in mind is that the emerging populations are growing. And so the less developed is orange here, the more developed is green. Healthcare expenditures in the less developed countries are about 1/10 of those in the more advanced economies. So the growth in healthcare utilization, the growth in the healthcare need is going to be in the developing countries. So actually the developing countries will define these needs much more. So instead of the traditional innovation coming from the developed countries to the less developed countries, I think we need to think about reverse innovation, where the challenges in less developed countries can actually be a source of innovation. Now, that doesn't mean we can't learn from Harvard or Stanford or whatever. And in fact, there's lots of innovation there. But the one-way approach, I think, is not appropriate. So my last point is on striking the right balance between technology transfer and national innovation. This leads to the question of open innovation, which has been a big fad. You have closed innovation. The Colonel was also alluding to some aspects where everything is in one area and you don't engage with outside ideas. So you have a research institute, you have a company, and all the ideas go in a funnel here and you finally get a product. Open innovation is much more fluid and you work with many different projects, you work with many different people, you work with universities, work with industry, and that's the CREST model, and that's open innovation. I should emphasize that open innovation is not a new idea. The Roman Empire was the original open innovators. So this is the Roman aqueduct. These are some of the innovations, and one of the key innovations, and this relates to the incentive structure that the Colonel was mentioning, was Roman law, the 12 tablets, which allowed immigrants to come to Rome compared to the other Italian cities which were closed. But immigrants could come to Rome, bring their ideas, they could get Roman citizenship, and all these kinds of reduction of red tape and so forth that allowed new ideas to come together, and that allowed the Roman Empire to then dominate the Mediterranean and Europe from there. So we need network innovation with internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, and also global. So this technology transfer, national innovation, I would really call it global innovation. In our COVID era, we've had a lot of nationalism, with the Russian vaccine, the American vaccine, and so forth. This is a big problem, but I think those countries, like the Roman Empire, that can engage with many countries at once and be neutral and bring those ideas together, they will be successful in this crisis as well as innovation more generally. So I look forward to the discussion, and thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Areas there which really are quite broad. I just want to pick up on one before I pass over to Dr. Kalai and Colonel to see if they would like to ask you a question. You mentioned reverse innovation. And of course, one of the things we pick up on the news are the countries around the world where they either are managing COVID-19 or they're having a huge problem with spikes of COVID-19. Let me just take two areas in the world in particular. One is Africa and the other is South America. Do you think anything is being learned at this time about what's happening in those two areas around the globe that could therefore be turned into this innovation, as you mentioned?
Well, I'm not familiar with any specifics, to be quite frank, but I do know about digital healthcare measures in general. As you may be aware, East Africa in particular, but Africa more broadly, but East Africa, Kenya in particular, have very advanced finance systems with mobile payments and so forth. They've leapfrogged. So it's not quite reverse innovation, but it's leapfrogged over the existing systems. And you've heard about India, of course. They don't have landlines as much, but they just leapfrogged. Everybody has a mobile phone. So this sort of leapfrogging innovation is characteristic. And I think we can learn a lot from that. Some of the developed countries, and I think this speaks to that point, United States in particular, are stuck in certain paradigms that in order to progress beyond them becomes very difficult. So I think that we can learn from, my point is we can learn from all countries. So we can learn from Kenya, we can learn from the United States, we can learn from ourselves. The important thing, like the Romans understood, is to be open-minded about all the possibilities and facilitate this exchange of ideas.
Okay, thank you. Colonel, maybe I could just come over to you. You're a very well-traveled professional. What have you picked up from this, and what do you think we could learn from that as well?
The main thing that I have picked up is that different countries have got different healthcare system. I'm referring to a 100% universal healthcare system like in Malaysia, where everything is provided for by the government using the taxpayers' money. A mixed-based system like in Australia, where you have a mixed compulsory insurance schemes on top of the universal access, and a 100% insurance-based system like in States and other countries in Europe. We realize that if you take up the 100% insurance-based system, there is more money. And when there is more money, you're talking about more, of course, room for improvement and advancement. And which, you know, it's a problem for us when we rely 100% on public fund rather than public-private partnership kind of thing. So I would like to throw this to the panel for discussion on whether, you know, having a mixed system on top of the universal healthcare system or 100% insurance-based system does affect in terms of medical advancement and innovation. To see.
Kalai, do you want to pass a comment on that?
Okay, it's a very challenging question to answer simply because the disease burden of the country is also a major factor in this. Now, some of the countries that have to have a wholly insurance-based system does allow for many of those solutions to come on board, because there is the drive to achieve a payment provider, what we call reimbursables, as well as targets. Now, for a public funded system, despite us not having a wholly insurance base, yet Malaysia ranks very high among the world in terms of healthcare provision to the public. But at the same time, it allows the public to add on to a private insurance scheme. And many employers do have that in place. So in a nutshell, it should be about the outcome for the person. Now, if the person's health is looked after and the healthcare system is centered on the person, then having an option of add-on or a well-established public system provides the endpoint, which is health. So we've also seen in a fully, payment provider system, there are what we call dark spots. So people fall off the payment system. And we recognize in the pandemic, some countries, the highest morbidity is in those kind of populations.
Because of lack of accessibility to.
So there are challenges. So these are huge challenges. Yeah. So I think in the wider context, there are merits to any one of the system if it's well administered, depending on the economic ability of the country and where we are in the healthcare provision. But at the same time, it should be the public healthcare that takes precedence over everything else. I think in a well-funded public health system,
it is good.
It is good. Yep. So I think Malaysia it's ranked very high on that basis. The strength of the public deliverables are extremely good, and we've learned even in our COVID-19 containment, where anyone who is found to be positive or has been isolated, they are admitted for observation and early intervention in the public health system. Yep.
Even the illegal immigrants are being treated well.
So that is an extremely beneficial scenario for COVID containment.
In a pandemic.
So there are areas like this, right? And, I'm sure there are lessons to be learned all over the world where the mechanism of funding healthcare in the pandemic and some of those innovative solutions that come through will require a rethink of how it is financed in the future.
I actually have some comment on that, what the Colonel mentioned. If I can share a slide. Stuart?
Yes. Sure. They're just trying to get the slide up at the moment. It's just coming up. There we go.
You see it?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes,
so this is actually, I thought it was very interesting that Colonel had mentioned about this comparative health systems. So this is just a overview of different health systems with on the left being all private, if we have the insurance and the provision of care in private. And on the right is, for example, the NHS, all public, socialized health service or national health service. What's interesting is this mixed model of a national health insurance program. And I know this is controversial in Malaysia, but that seems to be what a lot of countries are converging on. It's what we have in Korea. So in other words, the insurance is public, and there's a lot of technical reasons why that's more efficient. Basically, risk, the idea of insurance is to spread risk. So the more it's spread, the more efficient it is. But the provision of healthcare, the doctors and the hospitals are private. That I think is the model that a lot of the world is converging on. So I just wanted to show that slide. The other thing that the Colonel had mentioned was about money. So the United States is a unique situation when it comes to healthcare. And I'm very experienced with the healthcare system in the United States, of course. And what's very interesting is more money clearly does not lead to more better outcomes. That's number one, which Dr. Kalai was referring to. The other interesting paradox is more money can make it more difficult to innovate. In other words, I think one of the problems in the American system is there's so much money in it. Most people think there's not enough money. Everybody wants more money, I guess. But the reality is there's so much money in it with such vested interest, billions and trillions of dollars, if almost, vested interest, that it becomes extremely difficult to change that. And so right now we have the election and there's the Obamacare and all sorts of debates that are extremely intense because certain vested interests cannot be changed. And I think we have to keep that in mind. I mean, incentives are very important. Money is important, but innovation is not always just throwing more money. In fact, more money can make it more difficult to innovate. That's what I wanted to comment.
Thank you. I'm going to interject there, if I may. this is so interesting. We should give you more time, but unfortunately, we need to move on to our fourth panelist.
I know.
Revisit this shortly after our fourth panelist has presented. So thank you so much, Professor. It's much appreciated. And we go on to our fourth panelist, who is Nordina Idris. Ms. Nordina Idris joined the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation in 1996 as a Deputy Director responsible in managing the intensification of research in priority areas and National Science Fellowship grants. With more than 24 years experience, Ms. Nordina has held various positions that were related to the development of biotechnology, infrastructure and IoT strategic planning, particularly for research and development, by working closely with key players from the industry, academia, and the ministry. To date, she is the Division Secretary for Strategic Technology and Application, S&T, in MOSTI. She is responsible for key strategic technology planning in the area of biotechnology, nanotechnology, aerospace, digital, and ICT. She also oversees strategic planning between the ministry and institutions in the science and technology policy, national biotechnology policy, and sharing information in AI, EDA, deep learning in MOSTI and other agencies. With that, Ms. Nordina, I'd like to hand over to you, and would you please give your presentation? Sorry to keep you talking, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Okay, I think, okay, first of all, thank you to the organizer of inviting me to be one of the panelists today. And I guess I am purposely to be positioned as the last speaker because I'm answering all of the questions from all the panelists, okay? Because I do agree with most of you. We are not here nor there, and we are in between. Because if you look at Malaysia, Malaysia is considered as the upper middle income country. So we are not so rich, but we are not so poor. So we are in between. So whatever our membership in any to join, we've been trapped in the middle. So for those in the lower middle income country, they will be subsidized, okay? And for those in the higher income country, I mean, they can have a say, okay? But we are in the middle. So for your information and all audience, on 14th of July, okay, we discuss on what all of us discussing today with the topic of COVID-19 challenges and moving forward. So we are discussing, I mean, thoroughly before, and we come up with, we segmentize the discussion into 3 parts. Okay, the discussion is basically to find out, I mean, the cure, not cure. I mean, what Malaysia can do for this pandemic. We cannot wait. We cannot wait in the mercy of other advanced countries to give their vaccines to us. And on top of that, we are not a vaccine producing country. And it's with our population to 32 million, is it really strategic or not for us to produce our own vaccine? So we keep on asking those questions surrounding it. So we divide the discussion in that meeting chaired by our Prime Minister. We divide it into 3 parts. One is the R&D, second is the clinical research, and the third is manufacturing capability. So in R&D, so basically we do have expertise, machines, center of excellence in diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. So particularly for vaccine R&D in Malaysia, we are advanced. We do have animal vaccines. Malaysia is one of the exporter of animal vaccines. Unfortunately, not for human vaccines. And when we look at the R&D, 28% is in cancer, and second is influenza. Okay, whereas for animal vaccine, most of it is under Newcastle viruses and DNV. Okay, Newcastle disease virus. So we are more success in animal vaccines toward commercialization. And for the other things, for human R&D, the majority of the infectious diseases vaccine development projects ended at the basic science stage. Okay, and then most advanced infectious disease vaccine development stage is at preclinical stage for cholera vaccine. So the start, okay, the big gaps is at the process development, meaning from the preclinical to upscaling. So I agree with most of the panelists that we need to think out of the box. It is not, we have to think what was the best model to go for this exercise. So the second thing is we discuss on the clinical research. I think with our diversity in population, we position Malaysia, we should actually position Malaysia as the a hub for clinical trial. And clinical trial itself is an industry. So we must promote that. Okay, I will answer for that vaccine initiative later. Okay, so we have CRM, for example, which can promote the clinical research in Malaysia. But unfortunately, for first in human trials is not being started or progressively being done in Malaysia. Sorry if I'm wrong, because this is the webinar for clinical research. I mean, the participants have to correct me if I'm wrong. So there is a need to position clinical research as an industry itself. So okay, if you look at the our engagement with companies recently, and most of them show their interest in Malaysia, but because our cases now is getting lesser and lesser, they go to so we've been cursed with our success, I can say that. Okay, so next, we look at the manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing. So as I said before, Malaysia is not a human manufacturing country, whereas if you look at our neighbors, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, they do produce some, okay, with different stages and capacity. Because the way I look at it, because they have the economies of scale. Their population, Indonesia 270, Philippines 108, and for Indonesia, they couple with their arrangement with Sinovac, for example, with the clinical trial. So while you can conduct the clinical trial in Indonesia, we book your vaccine. So, I mean, they have made many announcements about it. So people keep on asking, what happened to Malaysia? I mean, it seems that we keep silence on this, not silence, many announcements, but the assurance of getting vaccine. So what's next actually? So in that National Science Council meeting, we have a discussion. We look at our readiness, our industrial readiness of producing vaccines. And I think most of you, I mean the experts, to produce vaccines, actually the call must come from Ministry of Health. Because first thing first, when we want to set up the vaccine manufacturing in Malaysia, the first thing first, the purpose of the vaccine, it must be for the rakyat. I mean, for the people first, then for the export, for your profit. So the problem statement must come from the Ministry of Health. You must tell us, okay, where is the direction, okay, in particular this pandemic, where we should go, what is the planning, not only for vaccine, but the programs okay, the vaccination program, the national vaccination program for the country, for example. Because when we look at vaccine, there are many different vaccine technologies under development currently. So when we spoke to manufacturers, there are many levels and platforms. So one manufacturing plant of vaccine cannot change to other platform in the short term. So it must be in a very long term, strategically planning for that. For example, we do have companies that they claim that they are ready for it, but for inert vaccine. So
Nordina, can I just interject there? I'm so sorry. What you're talking about is exceedingly interesting and very topical. But for the sake of time and to get some discussion as well, I wonder if we can quickly pick up on a point, only one point, before we then take the panel into an open discussion and with any questions coming through. The question obviously has to come back to Dr. Kalai. Very much the issue, and I don't want to put him on the spot to have to answer it in detail, but I wonder if you've got a comment, Dr. Kalai, on what was just said about the production of vaccine.
Well, this is a very challenging question. You know, there are over 140 different pieces of the vaccine in development. And Malaysia is in the view that some countries have started the trials. That's what Nordina said, like Indonesia, for example. Now, some of these vaccine trials, it's not that we have not engaged in conversation. There has been conversation from UK to Russia to America through some of those initiatives, and China. But vaccine trials are not straightforward in the sense that there are many issues to consider. As we know, we heard from the panelists yesterday that the vaccine they developed and its efficacy and its safety requires a long process of development. So I think many countries all over the world are observing this. Where is the data that supports this? If the data is sufficiently good enough, then Malaysia has got no issues, at least in terms of clinical trials. That's what Ms. Nordina was trying to highlight. We have clinical trials unit who can undertake such trials subject to our regulatory requirements. For example, our Medical Research Ethics Committee, we need to comply with the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency. So there are regulatory mechanisms that will validate this preclinical studies, clinical trials in phase 1 and 2, and then into human trials using what we call healthy volunteers. I think this conversation is already happening in the background. Some countries, of course, in the way that these trials are being put forward, requires a country obligation. Because like I said, till today, there's not a single avenue for anyone to say this is the best approach to vaccination of the whole population. And there are also vaccine issues in the way they are tried. Some countries are, in fact, in the infective process of the disease. So vaccine developers want that kind of population. As Malaysia has done really well in containing our COVID scenario. So it is not so attractive for some of these, what we call trial processes to be run through. But it is still a good population to test because you have good multi-ethnic population. We cover almost about 40% of the world population just by being part of this Asia. So there are incentives for many of those vaccine trials to be brought in. The conversation is already ongoing. I'm sure Ms. Nordina is aware of it, and so is the Ministry of Health. However, like I said earlier, some of this requires good data, and in this pandemic, there's this clarity that requires to be made forth so that public engagement becomes, people need to volunteer and so forth. So that is, I think, the reason for this, what we call decision-making process, yes.
When it involves patient safety, it's going to be a long process. Yes. Remember dengue vaccine?
Yes, yes.
It was a disaster, and when it was first marketed as the solution for dengue, but turned out to be the other way around. So it is something that we need to think about.
Nordina, I don't want to get into a deep discussion now, but I hope that in some respects that's given you a little bit of a baseline of where the Ministry of Health is coming from. We need to just do we have any questions coming in from the viewers today? I've got one question here, which is with regard to MySetra, and the question is whether or not the data that is captured is going to be used for third party. Again, Dr. Kallai, I'm sorry, I have to come back to you again for this.
Yeah. He has put me in the spot several times, so this is, thank you for that. But yes, a very important question. Answer is an emphatic no. It is not shared with any third party organization. In fact, the MySejahtera app is a shared responsibility for every citizen of the country. Data is confidential. It is protected by the PDPA Act, which is data protection. In fact, if you look carefully at the app, it is only for the purpose of COVID-19 tracing. It is to protect every one of us as citizens of this country. And this is, in fact, an app by the government, which is the best security option they can get. And with that in mind, there is this active participation. So the registration and the uptake of the app is so high on the basis that people have yet to see the data being shared. So that is assurance given by the government in the way that this is a specific app for the purpose of monitoring and maintaining a containment of COVID-19. Yes.
Thank you so much. I hope that answers the person who posed that question. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to put one point up, and I'm not sure who would like to pick this one up. But this last presentation of Puan Nordina on vaccine, my question would be is, do we feel that certain aspects of COVID-19 are overshadowing the real work that needs to be done in controlling COVID-19 in the country? We've heard the emphasis being put on vaccine development, but the more we talk about vaccine development, are we losing focus also on other areas that are equally more important? And I'm wondering if I could just open that up to the panel. Carol, would you like to pick up on that first?
It's not an easy question to answer, honestly. All the factors are equally important. Vaccine is important for the solution, final solution. And of course, I don't see a point where, while we are focusing on development of vaccine, we are losing hold on all the other measures, at least not in Malaysia. We are very sure about that. But eventually, we need vaccine for this kind of disease. We are talking about opening up the borders, which has yet to come. It will be at least till the end of the year, maybe early next year, we don't know. Maybe even longer than that. And it has affected us as a country. And you know that it has affected all the countries in the world as well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Professor, maybe I could come to you over there in Korea. This last question that I put, and that comes to how people are working together and putting the right focus and on getting the right momentum going for this. Do you wish to make a comment on this last area of production of vaccines?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, let me comment in two ways. One, on the vaccines specifically, the vaccine issue specifically, and number two, on the innovation implications more generally. With respect to vaccines specifically, I think biologically speaking, the COVID virus, SARS coronavirus 2, has a very tricky biology. There are reports of non-sustained immunity, of very ready, easy transmissibility. It seems to pop up when the weather is hot, when the weather is cold. It doesn't have the same predictable dynamics as influenza. So my thought is that, it's not just my thought, many people are thinking that COVID will be here to stay for a long time, and a vaccine in the traditional sense of what a vaccine is may be very difficult. Now, what that implies is, and I don't want to go into the immunological specifics, but instead of trying to get a smallpox type vaccine where we eradicate COVID, which may not be possible, we don't eradicate a lot of viruses for that matter, we have a vaccine that focuses more on essentially preventing severe disease. So you can have more focused populations and basically convert COVID into a disease with a certain probability of death into basically the common cold. So that's my view on the vaccines. Now, with respect to the implications on innovation, vaccines, notwithstanding what I said earlier, are very important. And the Colonel had said about being very optimistic about the impact of innovation. And I think we should use COVID as an opportunity, tragedy that it is, to foster innovation in these many areas. And so vaccines are important. I don't believe they may seem like the definitive solution, but all these aspects about digital healthcare, telemedicine, looking at the patients, reform of the healthcare system, greater focus on public health, and so on and so forth, depending on the countries, United States, Malaysia, are different. But I think if we can have innovation across a broad front. In my plenary speech yesterday, I talked about new paradigms in medicine. So not just drug therapies, not just vaccines, but perhaps looking at entirely new ways of doing medicine. So I hope that, I think there is a risk, Mr. Pack, of too much focus on vaccines, but I hope, concurring with the Colonel, that we can advance innovation more broadly.
Professor, thank you so much for that. And I think we have now run out of time, unfortunately, and I have to wrap this up. Firstly, by thanking Pan Nordina for coming online, Professor, for coming online from Korea. I hope the weather is good for you out there at the moment, but nice of you to join us today. Colonel Kalai, thank you both very much indeed. I'm sorry, Dr. Kalai, we put you on the spot. Yep. We should do that more often. It was fun. But thank the panel very much indeed. For the viewers, we hope you found this first session of value, and each of the sessions has been very different in its own way. And we hope you've enjoyed that and learned something from it as well. So with that, we bring the first session to a close. Thank you all very much indeed, and thank you panelists as well.
Thank you very much.
We have a 15-minute break before we run into session 2. So go and make your cup of tea now if you wish, but we will be back with you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, well, welcome back to session 2. And I'm very pleased to see that we have over 300 people tuning in right now. So we hope to make this session 2 as informative as session 1. We have again 4 panelists. This time we have 3 live with us here and 1 online. This afternoon's panel is made up of Dr. Zahar Mansour, who is from Microsoft Malaysia. We have Mr. Yu Kian Singh here, who is from the IME Group companies. Mr. Abdul Halim, who is from High Tech Managed Services. And of course, we have Mr. Jaffrey, who is CEO of CREST. This afternoon session, second session, is going to be more focused on technologies and the technologies that are being either developed or being used or going to be used in the future with COVID-19, perhaps other things as well. So let us go straight into the first presentation, and that will be Dr. Zahar, who is actually going to speak to us online. Dr. Zahar received a first-class honours degree in Computer Systems Engineering from Monash University, Australia in 1985 and completed his PhD in Computer Science in 1988. Dr. Zahar joined Microsoft in 2005 and has more than 33 years of professional experience in ICT and telecommunications in senior leadership, engineering, research, as well as academic roles. He is presently an adjunct professor at International Islamic University, Malaysia, and a member of the Industrial Advisory Panel at several other universities where he works closely with academia and has publications as well as professional certifications and recognition in data science, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, software engineering, computer architectures in telecommunications and digital transformation. He also holds several associate positions in PCOM, MQA, Department Standards, and CIRM. Well, you will see that this gentleman comes very well qualified to talk about engineering and particularly the format now of what everyone is looking at with COVID-19. So with that, may I hand you over now to Dr. Zahar, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Dr. Zahar, welcome.
Thanks, Stuart. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I can't be there today. I'll start with saying that AI-enabled digital platforms has driven significant social economic transformation over the last couple of years. And COVID-19 has really accelerated the pace by forcing upon us digital transformation across all industries, including healthcare. And this gives enormous advantages to digital healthcare companies. Today, I would like to share my thoughts on what the existing or incumbent healthcare providers should do as we enter this post-COVID era. Next. So analysts are of the opinion that digital platform has enormous potential for solving problems that plagued the healthcare industry for decades. So when I say digital platforms, these are business platforms that has successfully leveraged on 3 things. Firstly is agility that enables them to disrupt and respond to disruption. Secondly, business models that involve double-sided network effects, and good examples of this are like Grab for transportation, Netflix for broadcasting, Amazon for retail, Google for advertising, Spotify for music, and so on. And thirdly, when I talk about digital technologies, this is not just computing, but a mashup of this mobile, social, Internet of Things, big data, all enabled by computing infrastructure, which is 1/10 of the cost of traditional infrastructure like hyperscale cloud, and all glued together by the internet. And this powers things like powerful technologies like intelligent automation with artificial intelligence. So the question is healthcare exposed to this disruption? I think many feels that it is. And we're starting to see even in this country, companies like Doctors to You and Book Docs are becoming important companies that many of us actually use today. Next. Now, when we look at healthcare, there are 2 sets of discrete but interrelated forces, driving forces that is changing and disrupting healthcare. that we see globally. I think the first one is that this long-term systemic issues that healthcare organizations must address. Most of patients are unsatisfied. Secondly is that many are suffering with huge losses in cybersecurity. Thirdly, they're unable to really fully leverage on the data they're sitting on, essentially, right? And fourthly is that WHO projects there will be a shortage of healthcare workers in the near future. Now, the second group of challenges is that COVID-19 has put additional pressures on the healthcare organizations. I think, reduced income for cancellation of lucrative elective procedures has resulted, especially the private healthcare providers, to be challenged. We are also seeing pay cuts, layoffs due to system-wide disruptions. We also see depleted reserves and budgets due to increased expenses and reduced margins. And now these organizations need to recover from this crisis. Next. So as Winston Churchill says, never let a good crisis go to waste. So as during COVID-19, many healthcare organizations had to go digital for business continuity. So and the use cases where they deploy in days rather than months are typical workloads like communication and collaboration to allow people to work together, emergency response to measure and track their assets, ad hoc computing capabilities for COVID-19 specific workloads. And now that we are going to the recovery mode, they need to then leverage on this digital transformation that they were forced to undergo and strengthen it, right? So that they can rebound and recover from the business. And when you talk about digital transformation, it involves three pillars for healthcare. Firstly, patient engagement and how we address the changing expectations of patients. Secondly, to empower healthcare workers and enhance the collaboration, avoid manual workflows, and make informed decisions. And thirdly, improve operations by doing more faster with less. And with that being strengthened, then we can start to reimagine and how to deliver better healthcare for everyone. Quoting what Prof. Organ said just now, this enables entirely new ways of doing healthcare. So in conclusion, next please. I think digital transformation is not an option, and COVID-19 has made it urgent for all of us. The second point is that healthcare organizations really need to take advantage of dealing the crisis with digital and then recover and reimagine by leveraging on digital technologies. And thirdly, digital technology is about democratization of technologies. So what's stopping us is mainly the change in mindset to drive the organizational transformation required for us to go into this, to be successful and in this digital age. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Zaha. I was just trying to pick up on that, your mix of optimism and pessimism. I think the pessimism first of where the interruption or the disruption is perhaps being taken in different ways by different people, but also giving opportunities as well. And I have to very quickly pick up on your statement made by Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. I'm just wondering when he said that, what he meant by a good crisis. One could often ask what is a good, and I think there's a different meaning for good. Anyway,
yeah.
Thank you very much for that indeed. Can I just pick up on that there are great opportunities as well, but don't you feel also that too many people are jumping on the bandwagon of opportunities and therefore confusing what could be a better avenue to move forward? Because so many people are trying to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, particularly in technology development, software development, and so on.
Okay, so thanks for the question, Stuart. I think whether we like it or not, things are going to, what technology does is really to augment our capabilities, right? And moving forward, what we need to do is leverage on technologies to enhance the capabilities and the ingenuity of human being, and so that we can do more with less, right? So, and that's why I think if you look at, when we talk about the World Economic Forum, it talks about that in the future, people need to really leverage on technologies because of the fact that, many aspects of these technologies will essentially take over some of our, day-to-day tasks, especially the ones which are repeated. And it puts a premium on, the capabilities of human beings like empathy, creativity, and so on. So I think whether we like it or not, I think this is going to happen. And a lot of organizations are seeing this. Really what we need to do is to be able to respond to these changes in the most efficient way, leveraging on digital technologies.
How do you think we're going to balance again, coming back to the good crisis, a lot of people are taking the opportunity where there may be a commercial value in this crisis. But because of it, so many people are trying to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Who do you think should be actually weighing this up and controlling this rush to try and do something because there's commercial value in it?
I think at the end of the day, it's a balance, right? Obviously, it needs to do something. It needs to solve a real problem, right? But then you cannot solve a real problem if you cannot sustain it at the end of the day, right? So it's always about creating this, as I said, this double-sided network effect where the value is on the provider as well as the recipients of the services and so on, right? And being able in a digital world, being able to balance that in near real time will be what a lot of the successful digital companies do. So all about creating value at the end of the day for all parties in this, in this ecosystem, essentially.
Can I, Jeffrey, can I just come over to you and ask on this point of balance? Where do you feel this creativity is going to go, and who is actually doing the balancing?
Well, thank you, Stuart, for that question. Maybe my response would be, it would be a natural selection, I would say. It would be a natural selection in the sense that I think there will be, in the outset, there will be a whole lot of people trying to take advantage. But at the same time, they cannot sustain as what I think Dr. Zahar mentioned. They will probably not be able to sustain if there is just too much supply of a particular solution. And therefore, some will drop off and only the strongest will survive and so on. So I think in a normal economy, a natural selection process will probably help balance it out, per se. I don't think the role of people like government and so on should play too much of an active role in this. That's my personal opinion.
Are there any comments you'd also like to make on this? I think what we'll do is we'll wait till we get to the various presentations, and then we can get some general questions coming out from that afterwards. Dr. Zahar, we thank you very much indeed for your presentation.
Very welcome.
We'll come back to you shortly after the other presentations, and I'm sure there'll be some further questions coming your way also. If we could now go on to our second presenter, this is Mr. Yu Kian Seng from the IME Group of Companies. Mr. Yu Kian Seng has more than 18 years of experience in the manufacturing industry. He has managed more than 25 product development projects, which include the complete process from R&D to production to marketing. He was involved in process improvements projects and created engineering systems that automate industrial tasks. He also developed mechatronic solutions as well as electronic control systems. He performs his expertise in business development, strategic planning, and championed numerous cost reduction projects. He now provides business and technical consultation in strategic planning, automation, lean manufacturing, and Industry 4 implementation. And he successfully implemented MES, big data analytics, AI, and production improvement related projects. So again, we have a speaker who has a wealth of experience and knowledge in developments, which are going to fit very well into what's happening now with COVID-19. So with that, may I now hand over to Mr. Yu, who will now give his presentation. Mr. Yu.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Surat, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, without further delay, let's start on my presentation on how we use technology and innovations to combat COVID-19. All right, this is a chart that I copied from the internet, not from myself, but I think this chart is actually very relevant to what we want to discuss today, the digital health technologies in fight against COVID-19. Of course, you can see there are numbers of technology over there. So if I want to go detail, we can speak for months in detail. But I'm just going to do a short introductions on how this technology is helping. All right, it's helping us, helping the world to combat COVID-19. Of course, from there you can see technologies like augmented reality, right? Virtual reality, we have telemedicines, we have health sensors, 3D printings, artificial intelligence. Those are technology that previously never been explored before. Yes, maybe in a small little area, but not in a vast or in the whole swing. But after COVID-19, during this session, we can see that a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, same with us, we started to explore and to use technology to help us to combat COVID-19. So in detail later part, I will show the case study how we use this technology. All right, so because you can see that those technology can be used in different areas. I'll take a few examples. All right, augmented reality, you can see that staff training. We no need to be on site to train the staff. So we can train it using this augmented reality where they can just wearing a VR glasses to do a training. So this is a technology that for us is very convenient. During the COVID-19, right? I think a lot of people work from home. So you cannot have access face-to-face training. So this is somewhere that we need to venture to have business continuity, to do something which is different and to accept a new normal. So those are what we need to do now. Part of that, you can see that we also do have 3D printing technology, right? So this technology been there for quite some time, but it's not really mature, I would say, in Malaysia. Then slowly we can see that a lot of 3D printing technology being implemented, especially for plastics. But soon we have metal 3D printing, and still in Malaysia, the acceptance level is still low. So how can we move forward? During COVID-19, we see that a lot of supplies been stopped. We cannot get a part because of this crisis pandemic. So this 3D printing is actually helpful for us to print anything that we want to help us to produce a part to support, right? Especially during COVID-19, we have a lot of frontliners that require PPE. But when you have supply shortage, you need to use something to produce the PPE, all right? So this is where 3D printing, we can see that it raised, right? It raised the acceptance level. Suddenly, you can see that a lot of innovative, all right, engineers, those hobby makers, they use this technology to help us to combat COVID-19. And a part of that, a part of 3D printing, you can see AI. AI, a lot of things now is we can see even electronic appliances, they come with AI. What is AI? Artificial intelligence, where we use system, software, IT to analyze when we have data, and it can turn into decision making and can mimic the decision making by a human. So by doing this, it actually help us to analyze or to predict things in much better way. So those technology is actually helping us. During COVID-19, some say COVID-19 is a catalyst for digital transformation. Why? Yes, because we cannot work from office. We need to work from home. Means we need to get the job done in the home, in from our house. But how to get this done? Technology, right? Like now, we have actually these seminars online, but we can engage to 300 hours of participants by using this type of technology. Yes, it's very good. Everyone still can have access to the information by sitting at home. So you can see this is one example how technology is helping us to be in a new normal, especially during pandemic. All right, the next slide I would like to share is on how we use technology. You can see that these are the steps during COVID-19, right? Because for us, all of us, we work from home. Then we receive an urgent call to support on the PPE, especially from CREST. So we deploy 3 teams, right? One in Penang, one in KL, one in JB, to print out the face shield. The reason because we are of shortage, right? We cannot order. We want to order for overseas, it takes time. So the easiest way is to use 3D printer to print immediately, and then we manage to deliver to hospital to support COVID-19, all right, as a protections for the frontliner. And the process, you can see that first we need to have the 3D modeling, all right? Then we put this 3D modeling file into the slicing program, then we print it up. On the spot, right, without using any mold, you can print the structure of the face shield. And at the end, you just slot in the protective cover, that's it. So how fast this technology can help us to produce the PPE. So those are one example how we use this technology. And then a bit of the sharing, actually we have delivered to 12 states, all right, 48 hospitals, 500 over face masks been delivered. And then for the face shield, we delivered almost 38,000 pieces of the face shield all over to Malaysia. So there is a bit of contribution for us to help to fight the pandemic during MCO. Okay, a second technology that I would like to share is on thermal imaging. For now, you can see, after we implemented this MCO, right? Then of course we have how many phases? I think 3 to 4 phases during that time. Then government released during phase 2 and 3, released certain industry that allowed them to go back to work. So I share this photo is because you can see that there are long queue. Why there are long queue over there? Over there, the reason because they need to do temperature checking. That's the first thing. Recording on the data, all right, their names or the details. After that, they need to make sure that they have passed all those checking points before they can enter to premises. So all the photos are taken online, all right? It shows that some of the premises, they have actually a queue close to half of kilometers to queue. And then they waited like 2-3 hours under the hot sun to just able to enter to premises. But how we help? We actually received a few calls that asked us to help, especially in manufacturing, because I was involved a lot in manufacturing line. So we help them to deploy thermal imaging and AI technology so that you can use this technology to help them first to detect temperature without manual detections. And then AI technology able to capture the face identity, and then to convert into the name when they're able to search in the library. And from there, it converted into a data, a report as a storage to comply government requirement. So that is really what we did. So a little bit of the technology part of it. So you can see that. So how the system works? First, we deploy a thermal camera with a black body. So black body is usually a device to calibrate the thermal so that we can have accurate data. So from there, then you move toward the detections for the temperature reading, and then it gives alarm in case we detect the high temperature. And then, so a little bit of photos of the case study that how we use it. So you can see that the difference over there is actually in real time. You don't need to stop, so that you can just walk through the camera and enter the premises. So that's how we help them to combat just now the long queue problem. And then next, we use artificial intelligence, all right, to recognize the face features. Instead of queuing and write the name, now we able to detect the name by using this technology. And then we can give a similarity level out of 100%, how many percent, and then it can give us a detailed name out of it. So this is how we automate the recording. And you can see there are many points on the face. This is all the points that we use to detect. All right, so this is a bit on the system architecture part of it. You can see the comparison 0 to 1, 1 to 1, and then you can see the rate is actually where it failed to detect. An example of the report that can be generated from here, right? You can see there's a name, all right? A timestamp when they pass through the detection area, a temperature, and then of course a face capturing image. So then it convert to the Excel, keep as a record. So with doing this, you don't have, you don't require any worker or security guard to be there, to station there to do this checking. I can even link this system into the boom gate, to only allow them to have access if, let's say, the temperature is on normal and they are wearing a mask. So we use technology to do these detections. And a part of this artificial intelligence, all right, you can see that example, all right, you can see it can differentiate the gender, female or male, age, mask, whether they are wearing or not, and then whether they're wearing glasses or not, and then of course, reporting. Few other technology that you can see that are being implemented, drones, okay, and robotics. Okay. There are many more, but those are few technologies that we can see is actually really helping us. So without that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think it gives a very interesting perspective of how technologies are being developed. I've got a bit of a cynical question I would ask you. And with these technologies that are being adopted now, particularly on temperature, you can go and have your temperature taken 3 times in the same establishment and have 3 different temperatures. What's happening about calibration of these technologies? Because that has to be an area that has to be of concern. When these technologies are being so broadly used, who's actually calibrating them?
Okay, a very good question. You talk about calibration of temperature reading. If you use a normal handheld devices, right? So when you take a temperature readings, so that it shows you the reading, but how good, how accurate is the reading? Nobody knows. But actually, of course, you need to have calibration stickers, right? So it depends whether the device being calibrated or not. For us, thermal imaging, you know that we implemented the thermal camera with a black body. This black body is a device that will generate a heat map. It always generates 35 degrees in the real time. So this is actually a device that will transmit a correct temperature. So if I go to a room temperature or outdoor, so this device will tune, it always will be at 35 degrees. So that's why it will be, by doing this, calibration happen real time. Instead of after you use it for 1 month, half a year, then you see that the device is actually not accurate anymore. So that is actually the technology behind it.
Is there therefore some statutory requirements that these probes, temperature probes, are being measured or are being calibrated for the value of the public who may have suddenly a high temperature in one place, but not such a high temperature in somewhere else?
Yeah.
Is it?
It happens. Yeah, it happens. Because of it now, you can see that everywhere we are using IR temperature, thermometer. But how many of us calibrated it? And when you buy it, how accurate is it? I don't think we carry out this type of inspection calibration before we use it. But of course, if you want to do it, of course, the cost is there. And then whether anyone would like to, willing to pay for the calibration cost, that's another thing. But at least we actually carry out this filtering process at the first phase. So that is very important. Accuracy will be something is good to have, definitely it's good to have, but of course we cannot, make it as mandatory. And of course we have actually limitations of the lab to carry out this calibration at the moment. But if let's say it's important, basically we can do it in the stages. That's my opinion.
There is a question I'd love to ask, but I'm not going to. And that's about facial recognition.
Right.
Very sensitive area.
It is.
You didn't mention the use of the umbrella, which some people use so they can't be seen.
Yeah.
Obviously, facial recognition is going to be a huge thing, and I don't want to dwell on that at the moment. The panel has other things to discuss. So with that, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. We'd now like to go on to our next presenter. This is Mr. Abdul Halim. And Mr. Abdul Halim joined HITEC in 2000 as finance manager, responsible in assisting HITEC during the flotation exercise. Prior to joining HITEC, Mr. Abdul Halim was attached to the Hanafiya, Razlan and Mohammed for 5 years, performing auditing, corporate finance and corporate recovery related assignments. In HITEC, he served as Chief Financial Officer and Vice President in 2002 and later promoted to Senior Vice President in 2005. In 2008, he was appointed as CEO of HITEC Managed Services, focusing on end-to-end ICT infrastructure solutions. In 2013, he was also entrusted as CEO of HITEC iSolutions Sdn Bhd to oversee the financial services industry. He is a council member of the Malaysian Institute of Certified Public Accountants and also serves as the chairman of the Young Certified Public Accountants of MICPA. With that, I now invite Mr. Abdul Halim to give his presentation this afternoon.
Thank you, Stuart. I think earlier Dr. Zaha mentioned about how healthcare has led, how technology has led healthcare into fighting COVID-19. I think from High-Tech Padu's point of view, what we're trying to do is actually, the technology answers the questions of the whats and the whys. We as a local system integrator, what we do is we do the interpretation of how we want to implement to either to businesses, to the customers, and in this case, in our story, it's actually to the Minister of Health Malaysia, where we actually played a small role in actually implementing technology and using technology, leveraging, and in helping Malaysia fight its COVID-19. Just a bit of background, High-Tech Padu, we are about 1,100 people. And I think, interestingly, it was quite a revelation. At the peak of the MCO, 80% of our staff are actually working from home. So that's the good news, I guess. The other good news is also we're also providing services to the essential services, mainly the public sector and also the financial services. Whilst 80% of people are working from home, we realized that there's about 130 people actually frontliners. They are supporting the hospitals and also our data center. We managed to keep our service level up, and so far no customer complaint. So then again, how do we do that? Again, it's technology. Yeah. Then straight on to be our experience. At the height of the MCO, the MOH decided they want to set up this COVID-19 facility in Amsterdam. It was quite an ad hoc. Well, it was a big decision, but getting the place physically ready was quite a challenge. We basically had 7 days to get the place up and running. It was integration between 3 major agencies, which is the MOH, Jabatan Menteri, and also Jabatan Tentera. And what they did was we had to integrate. We had to come up with this facility. Our role in this was to provide the health information system in order to operate within this facility. This facility, it's located in Serdang, it's got 600 beds. Our task was to provide the system that manages the workflow of the patients checking in and checking out of the facility. And the system also enables expedited the processes of registration, bed management, clinical notes, recovery and discharge, and pharmacy. And eventually we have these records will then feed into the CPRC system, which will then fit into the famous 5 p.m. Press conference by our local hero, Tan Sri Dr. Noisham. So this is how technology has played into role. At the back, it's all about the digitization, where actually the radiology comes into the picture. We're using the cloud. The system is running from a private cloud, and where we have mobile solutions running all over the facility, feeding into the backend system. And just some stats. During the facility in Amsterdam was commissioned on 16th of April, and it was decommissioned by 15th of July. Throughout that period, there was 439 users of the HIS. We serviced about 1,585 patients. And interestingly, there was 62,000 clinical notes being input, as an entry into the system. Gone are the days the doctors scribble something and pass to the nurse. Now with the HIS that we've developed, there's a template for doctors to input the records into the HIS. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. The good thing is, we got it ready within 7 days, and it was quite a feat. Notwithstanding, Obviously, we didn't do it alone. There was a big ecosystem. We were working with the principals that supported us, namely Microsoft, Dell, HP, Lenovo, and a few others who actually helped us in this. Well, and also, it's also the coming together of all the various government agencies. You know, the technology can do so much, but the challenge in digitization and digitalization is actually to break down the physical barriers across human beings. That was quite a challenge, especially when we had to do it within 7 days. And what it means is this, you know, previously, what we showed was this is just a tip of the iceberg, how high-tech is trying and helping, working with MOH, trying to transform the public healthcare. And I think the MyAmsterdam was a good acid test, and alhamdulillah, we managed to do it successfully. Okay, that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, I can pick up on a couple of interesting things there. They may not be topical for what we're talking about, but I'm going to ask them all the same.
Yeah.
You mentioned 80% of your workforce was working from home.
Right.
How many of them still today are working from home?
That's a good internal conversation. You know, the normal human being is we're all creatures of habit. You know, once the MC was lifted partially, almost everyone wants to get back to office. I said, no, you're all missing the point. We're all missing the point. I think internally what we discussed is actually eventually I said to the guys, hey, you know, being a technology company, we should be on the forefront and trying to fulfill this work from home and using technology as a leverage. Internally, we're saying that in the new normal, probably we want to have 70-80%, only 70-80% people working physically, or the rule of thumb is every 5 days, or in 1 or 2 days you work from home. That's the rule of thumb, and we need to start that. And it's quite a challenge. People are creatures of habit, but I guess from a technology standpoint, being a technology company, we have to push it through, and we have to walk the talk.
Well, I think it's not only technology that is being innovated, it is personal habits as well. And I know there's at least one country that's been in the news that is very critical of the number of people who are still staying at home.
Yeah.
And they're saying you must go back to work. And I think that is going to be a very interesting question, is really how many people do need to be in a given workplace and how many can actually use technology to do their work. Not necessarily at home, by the way. A lot of people now have their meetings in coffee shops. So they're using technologies, of course, for communication. So I'm sorry, I had to ask that one. It was just an issue that I felt was an interesting one. The other, of course, is where technology is going in terms of software development. And you talked about digitization and digital notes in hospitals. And I've seen one of the biggest problems is getting everyone in tune with that way of writing notes. And of course, not everybody can write notes in a digital format. So where do you think that's going to go? Obviously, it's going to have to be digital at the end of the day, but there are still a lot of people are unable to do that. So what comment would you have on that?
Well, I think people, doctors are creatures of habit.
I didn't say doctors, by the way.
Yeah.
But you did.
Oops. Well, I think when we first started on this project about 5-7 years ago, there was this big resistance. But as we go along, the good news is as we go along, as more and more Gen Y and Gen Z doctors coming into the practice and service, we see lesser resistance. So it's trying to find the right balance of people wanting to use these clinical notes, and also the hospitals trying to force through this. And of course, the challenge is to have a good system that can find the right balance between the format of clinical notes that we have. There are some boxes that you need to tick, and there are some places for you to scribble down notes. So it's trying to find that right balance. Again, it's a journey. It's a journey, and I guess as we go along, it's a no-brainer that it will lead towards that. Yeah.
And you mentioned the program. You gave some statistics on. What was the greatest lesson that came out of that? What was the biggest shock that came out of what you learned from that exercise?
I guess crisis actually knocks more sense into us, into human beings. And I think when we are faced with the basic human nature of when we face with adversity, we come together. And once we have a clearer objective, what we want to achieve, in this case, we want to save lives, then I guess people will naturally put aside their natural biases and work towards a common objective. And again, if there's any IT word for the year, the biggest catalyst for digital transformation is unfortunately COVID-19.
Yep. But just coming back to what you presented, how would you do it differently if you were to do it again? What did you learn from that, and how would you do it differently now?
Tough question. I guess, of course, this is a very technology biased statement, but I think if I were to tell organizations, it's not a sin to overinvest in technology. It's not a sin. People think as technology as a cost center. Eventually, people think this as an investment. But I personally think it's not a sin to overinvest in technology, because when you need it, you need it, and you need to have. And the technology is there. You just need to have it at your disposal to leverage from it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to give you a tough question.
Yeah.
But you answered it very well.
Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. Okay, I think in the sense of timekeeping, it's time to move on to our if I say final panelists, it doesn't sound right, does it? Or leaving the best till last. All panelists are equally valuable, but let me now introduce Mr. Jeffrey to you all. Jeffrey is the founder of CEO of Collaborative Research in Engineering, Science and Technology, otherwise known as CREST. CREST, of course, have played a huge role in this conference in the last 3 days, and of course in today's presentation. So we must congratulate CREST in the work that they have done. I must also, if you don't mind, just take a moment to congratulate the technicians and all the technical team who really are doing a splendid job of making sure this is moving forward.
Absolutely.
And I hope we still have over 300 people at the other end of the line here who are, and I get the thumbs up. So I'm glad you're still there, and the team is doing a great job to keep us all live. He began his career as an entrepreneur that built on information service in Klang Valley in 1986. He later joined Oracle Corporation Malaysia in 1990 as a consultant in the professional services organization. He started his own technology consulting business in 1994, focusing on the oil and gas industry. Jeffrey rejoined Oracle Corporation as managing consultant at the onset of Malaysia's MSc program. He later joined Arthur Andersen's business consulting division in 1998, and then the technology consulting and technology integration services group at Capgemini, Ernst & Young in 2002. Prior to joining CREST, he was vice president of business and technology advisory division of Malaysia Debt Ventures, MDV, Berhad, where he facilitated the development of information and communications technology, ICT, biotechnology, green technology, and other emerging technology sectors by innovative financing. Jeffrey obtained his BSc from the University of Iowa City in USA, where he majored in computer science and minored in business studies. And with that, Jeffrey, I now hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Yeah, I'm I guess the last speaker for the panelist for the day. Let me just start by maybe giving you a bit of background about CREST, the organization. Now, what I'll go through is a couple of slides with regards to the digital healthcare cluster, which is a cluster within CREST. And CREST itself is a non-profit organization. And essentially we have 90 members at the moment, with about 300 potential collaborators talking to us seriously about being part of one or the other initiatives that we have. Let me get to the slides. Hang on. Yeah, skipped. Can I go back one? Oh, yeah. Okay. The one before this. Before this. Oh, okay. Sorry. So can you? Does it seem to work? Okay, sorry. It seems to be skipping. Okay, let's stop that. Okay, so essentially, digital healthcare cluster is one of the initiatives that we have within CREST, and essentially it's a bunch of companies, researchers, entrepreneurs, and essentially government officials and so on coming together to collaborate, and together through workshops and discussions, we have decided on 3 different things that we would like to champion within the digital healthcare cluster. The first thrust, as we say, is the to initiate strategic collaboration to innovate digital healthcare solutions. Now, this is with regards to essentially facilitating R&D and C. That's R&D and commercialization and market access for digital healthcare initiatives. The second area, the second thrust that we have is to encourage the application of AI and data analytics to improve efficiency and productivity. And excuse me, the third one is to foster a vibrant, innovative culture and competitive talents, competent talents for digital healthcare. So these are the 3 different thrusts that we have agreed with our community. Okay, so throughout the year, since we started in 2018, essentially we've basically have a number of initiatives. We basically signed an MOU with the Ministry of Health in 2018. We basically have briefed our stakeholders, essentially in the picture that we briefed the Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister actually, on our R&D initiatives. We basically have launched what we call the Digital Healthcare Cluster Day in 2019, to which we launched several initiatives on that day. We've basically developed several research and innovative courses to ensure that the talents within the healthcare profession is up to speed with all the digital initiatives. We basically embarked on 3D printing with MOH itself, and we're part of that task force. And we also embarked on a 5G Internet of Medical Things, where we try to look at how 5G can play a role in basically addressing some of the medical issues. Okay, so actually we missed one slide just before this, if I can get that. Okay, we are basically advised by a panel, and currently we have our, that was mentioned, the hero of the day is Tan Sri Dato Sri Dr. Noor Hisham, is an advisor to our panel, as well as one of the panelists before this session, Professor Dr. Ogun Gurel. These are the people that we look upon for basically deciding on some of the initiatives that we have. If I can go to the next slide. I think you missed one before this. Okay, so some of the initiatives that we have to date is essentially CREST becomes the neutral entity. So we facilitate discussions to which some of the key stakeholders that we have is the researchers, the Ministry of Health, and so on. So we look at the use cases to address. Some of the initiatives that we have is what we call the National Cardiovascular Data Analytics Project, to which we will basically go nationwide to collect data about our heart sounds and store it in a central repository. Another one would be the Malaysian Retinal Reading Center, MyRRC, which is also using AI to diagnose diabetic retinopathy. We also involved with the researchers and MOH on chest X-rays, to which one of the use cases that we have is to identify COVID-19 in the visual image as well, and using AI to identify and so on. We also have technology and innovation development, to which we basically help identify the PPE requirements of the country and try to work out all the supply chains that's required, as well as 5G healthcare, digital healthcare, which I mentioned earlier. Can I go to the next slide? So these are some of the initiatives. I think I'll skip this one and to the next one, the final slide. Okay, so essentially, we basically have the whole healthcare applications considering from wellness, data management, diagnosis, treatment, and all the way to follow-up. Some of the initiatives that we have with the community is considering the Internet of Medical Things, the wearables, the implantation medical devices, the smart sensing remote, in-house monitoring devices, mobile medical apps, as well as tactile internet, which is tele-diagnosis, tele-surgery, tele-rehabilitation, and so on. AI and data analytics is an important component to the solutions that we try to develop, as well as health IT, which is important to deal with the EMRs, the EHRs, cybersecurity, medical devices interoperability, as well as the software required. So these are some of the key initiatives that we are looking at. Okay, so that's all I have to share right now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Jeffrey. Well, we've had three interesting speakers, and Dr. Zaha, of course, online, presenting different facets of technology, software, innovations. Jeffrey, if I can just come back to you.
Right.
What is the one key area that you would say you've been involved with as far as COVID-19 is concerned?
Okay, so I think one of the key areas that we are involved in is essentially, I mean, when the pandemic descended upon us, I think a lot of people were unprepared. So even as basic as helping companies to be prepared as things start to open up, we help facilitate discussions about what the standard operating procedure should be. And one of the key industries that understand how to do this is the electronic manufacturing companies primarily based in Penang. Essentially, these companies have their equivalents in China, which was hit much earlier, and they have basically developed all the practices, the safe practices, to which they shared. And I think we use that as a basis to help not just the companies in Malaysia, but not just for electronics and manufacturing, but also to adapt that same procedures for other industries as well.
These initiatives that CREST has been working with, where do those initiatives come from? Do they come from within CREST, or do people come to you with those interested areas and therefore the initiative is born? Where does it come from?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question, Stuart. Actually, we never initiate the initiatives, and we try not to, because what we pride ourselves about is that we're always industry-led. And in this case, primarily a lot of the initiatives within digital healthcare is mostly the big cases that is identified by the Ministry of Health as our close partner. Also from the private sector as well. I mean, they basically are quite active. And I'm surprised since we started that the conversation and basically the collaborative nature of bringing the triple helix, the companies, the industry, the companies, the academia, and government together is quite easy, because we have a common, in particular for COVID, we have a common enemy that everybody wants to go, solve.
You mentioned one of the initiatives is collecting data, and you mentioned hard sounds as one of those
Yes.
initiatives.
Yes.
Again, where does that come from and where does it go to? Once you've got that data, what happens to it?
Good question. Okay, the reason why we wanted to collect the heart sounds is that for phase 1, we wanted to collect what we call the normal heart sounds, the normal average Malaysian, for example. So we want to segmentize it to, say, an age group, a particular, gender and so on. And we want to have a reference point for the country. For example, a 30-year-old male that lives the north side of Malaysia should sound like so, And once we have a normal heart sound, we then can go and ask our researchers to go pursue for the abnormal heart sounds. So what would be the sound of somebody with asthma, for example, or someone with a heart disease with the valves not functioning properly? We want to catch that early. So these would go back to how we would apply that information into future devices and also to personalize attention to the individuals.
I see some of the questions coming through from the audience.
Sure.
I'll address in a moment.
Okay.
But they touch on the same kind of area. That is this collection of data. Who owns that data? And what can you do with it? And I'm going to come to you in a moment to talk about commercial value of data, because that's again something on many people's minds. Is collecting data is one thing, but some people are making commercial value out of it.
Absolutely.
So let's just come back to the heart sounds.
Okay.
So who owns that data?
Okay, so when you collect the data, it's the normal process. You have to have the PDPAs signed, and the Ministry of Health will be the, shall we say, the recipient or the guardian of the information. So it will be kept in a repository that is actually that belongs to the Ministry of Health. We will administer it so that it is provided to the ministry.
Do you think that gives people confidence that that data is well taken care of?
That is a very key issue, and that it will always be a key issue, cybersecurity and fraud and so on. But those are things that we must address as we go into these areas.
Now, can I come to you?
Yeah.
Because maybe I can touch on the commercial value of data,
Right.
because I'm sure that's an area you may well look at as well. Is capturing data is one thing, but then what you do with it, one can use it for research, education, and so on. Other people's idea is to use it for commercial value. Do you have a comment you'd like to make on that?
Well, first and foremost, again, baseline is we have to protect the privacy of the data. That's where PDPA comes in. Notwithstanding, whilst we have many ranges of data, in this case, some of it are very personal and very private, but some of it can be shared. So then probably we need to categorize the data accordingly, what can be shared and what cannot. And for those that can be shared, this is where we can use technology. We can API enable these technologies to external parties for whatever use. Yeah, I guess the whole point is actually we need to protect the sanctity of the data. While some of the data can be shared, can be used for greater purposes, we need to make it as transparent as possible. And from a technology standpoint, we need to API enable this data for people to use it. Yeah.
Well, again, leading on from the work you do, Jaffrey, in developing these initiatives, maybe I come to Mr. You mentioned one initiative, and that is the use of 3D for developing something. Where do those initiatives come from? Are they driven by commercial value, or are they driven really by potential utilization? Because I'm sure there's a mix of the two there somewhere, but where would you start to produce something through a 3D process?
All right. I mean, designing a start of product, right? I mean, it started previously just on hand sketch. I mean, previously when things is not yet in the digital form. But when you see, why we design in 3D? Because first of all, we can see it in 3-dimensional instead of 2-dimensional. So that is the first thing that is actually better. Why I put it much better? Because it actually gives us more realistic view, and then we can see it much more, we can imagine the product much more better instead of just in the 2D view. That's the first thing. Secondly, 3D means you can turn it around. You can feel it, right? You can imagine it. So you don't need to have the knowledge to read 2D drawings. So that's why I think the advantage of 3D. And a part of that, when you have this 3D model, you can do more than just a drawing. You can export this 3D into like 3D printer, where you can print and you can come up with a part directly by itself. That's what. You can use this 3D to do a commercial advertisement, a nice graphical, a material, a part of that. You can use a 3D to do instruction manual, a guidance for operators to assemble, or even for users to assemble an IKEA product. Everything, if you just imagine you do it in 2D, how can we understand how to assemble it? But in 3D, it's actually much more easier to understand. So that is actually the context why we move toward 3D. And then, of course, from there, everything went in the digital form to realize an end product will be much more faster compared to from all the hard copy drawings that you want to convert it later on again.
Just out of interest, you showed your example. One of the examples is the face shield. How long from concept to delivery?
If you talk about concept to delivery, there are plenty of design on the internet. If you just get the design, you download it, within a few seconds, you can print it directly. It's so fast. You don't need to even design it. But if you want to design it, if you have the knowledge to design it, it will take maybe 10 to 20 minutes to just come up with a sketch and to print it out and try it out and improve it. Within 1 hour, you can get quite a good product. So that is how fast we use the technology to produce a part.
So I think it's just a question for the viewers, because it's interesting just to see how quickly one can get on with the job.
Yes.
When there's a need, COVID-19 has put up many needs, how quickly one can actually address that need and actually come out with a product. So you're saying for that particular product, that was a very fast process.
Very fast.
How long was it?
Okay, to get the design, the model, first you need to get the 3D. Either is you download it on the internet or you design it yourself. So if you design yourself, maybe 10 minutes if you have the skill, right? Then to produce it, it depends on how good is your 3D printer, how fast you can print it. Okay, if you want to do it faster, you set the resolution is much more lower. Okay, so that you can print faster, and the density inside it, you make it much more lesser. Means that you have actually hollow inside. Then you don't need to have more material to print in full. You can have a honeycomb shape inside so that you can print it faster. So that is, so to answer to the questions, how fast you can print it out, it can be within 30 minutes, it can even be even longer to 2 to 3 hours, depending on how good, how fast, how fine you want, and how strong you want.
So basically what you need is a good investor to get things rolling once you've done it.
Yes, yes.
So it comes back to CREST again. Right. Jeffrey, just to round up for this section before we go into some more discussion and open questions.
Sure.
What have you found from COVID-19 has been the most focused area for CREST? What have you looked at which has been most influential?
Okay, so we have actually, I might not have mentioned it earlier, but we basically have a little fund that we manage to, to fund R&D, and essentially, we're addressing to the research community how they can come in to address, their needs to address solutions that we need. But for the COVID-19, we have a number of projects that we think have, potential. One of them is a device that quickly identifies the virus within minutes, we hope, using a biosensor, and that can be brought out into the field. So one of our researchers is working on that. We've got various things like, I think I mentioned the X-ray image, seeing whether we can identify COVID-19 through an AI program. An algorithm is another one. I mean, there's various other different ones that.
Where are you, or where are they, the researchers in that particular program? Because this is something that's being talked about.
Right.
There's AI-driven diagnosis,
Right.
particularly with, excuse me, with COVID-19,
Right.
is with the chest X-ray.
Yes. I mean, for the chest X-ray ones, I think the researchers are still in the quite an early stage, unfortunately. Yeah. But we're still working.
It'll be of value later when it
Absolutely.
comes through, so
Yeah.
it has to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeffrey, for your presentation.
Thank you.
We've got a number of questions coming in from our viewers. Thank you very much for taking an interest in our panelists, and also for the questions that are coming in as well. I don't wish to forget poor Dr. Zaha. I hope you're still there, Dr. Zaha.
I'm still here.
Way here. We just want to make sure you're still there.
I'm enjoying all the question and answers actually. So.
Some of the questions coming through, and I'd like to go on to those, come under the same area. So I'm going to read one of them out, because I think, Mr. Yu, you started this one off. So now you're going to have to finish it off.
Okay.
How are the personal data, e.g. face recognition data, protected from abuse or inadvertent use?
Okay, interesting question. All right, face data. From our project implementations, the face data that we capture is actually internal data, or I'll call it is actually under protected by the organization. Right? So when we deploy the system, those data, first we need to capture the face image. Okay, the face image. So without the face image, the AI will not able to differentiate the master and the actual image. So this face image is actually provided by the end user, which is the end customer. So it means that this data is actually from them, not from us. So we didn't steal the data, they give us so that we can do the comparison. So by doing this, of course, definitely we will sign NDA, all right? No disclosure agreement to protect each party that this data will be used just for the technology and comparison purposes. So by doing this, the data will be inside the organizations.
Can I add about this concern on privacy and security, if you don't mind? Sweat? Hello?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I'm really happy to see that many of us out here are concerned about privacy. If I think maybe 5-6 years ago, people don't care about, privacy and security. They would say anything in Facebook and so on and so forth. Now, I like to separate, there was also a question to Jeffrey just now regarding this. I think we need to separate between privacy, which is the rights of, of everyone, versus extracting value from the data, right? So let's talk about privacy first. Now, according to PDPA, for example, the law is all about notice and consent. So, for example, if you take the situation where, you want to take that picture of someone, then I think the organization needs to get the explicit consent of the person, right? Now, the person may not want it, and therefore this comes to the value part of it. If they don't take it, then they might have to go to the harder process of getting registered. So the key point here is that when data is collected, they need to get explicit, consent from the data subject itself, right? And then from the data user, right, organization holding data, they then need to commit on making sure it is, it is actually stored and protected against unauthorized access. That means the security needs to be compliant, and that's basically the gist of what any personal data protection regime takes care. Now, I'd like to talk about extracting value, because there's also issues just now as who owns the data and so on and so forth. Now, I think you think about, all of us use Google for search, right? And not many of us, when we sign up to Google, use Google, there is actually a clause saying that, we're going to use your data for certain things. And in this digital world, data is actually, the oil of the 21st century, right? So there's always this thing, what is the value you get out of data? So if I do a search and I get good search outcomes from it, maybe I don't mind actually sharing data. And again, it's all about notice and consent. And every time you use these free services, especially, what we are paying is actually our, privacy, our data. So I think we need to separate that. So I think there is a value of, sharing data. Of course, organizations need to protect it, but certainly I think we should also not prevent the use of data for the benefit of, the data user or for the nation itself. Just a thought on this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We're running out of time, but there's another question very much related to heart sounds. And again, Jeffrey, I'll come back to you.
Sure.
And of course, the question is being raised by someone who's very much into heart sounds and research.
Okay.
I wonder if you can just talk a little bit more about that,
Sure.
and particularly where the sounds are coming from, who's looking at those, and who's analyzing those sounds.
Okay. All right. So the Heart Sounds project is essentially a joint collaboration between CREST and the Ministry of Health. We intend to basically, in the rollout, be collecting, I think, approximately 20,000 odd samples across the country. And the device that we will be using is an IoT stethoscope, which is basically, you put it on your chest, and for in 20 seconds, you will collect the data. And there's some AI attached to it, to which it calculates, the S1 and S2 and so on, and it stores it inside a repository. The way we're arranging with the vendor of the device is that we will anonymize the data for analysis, to which the detailed data will be protected under the Ministry of Health. Does that answer all?
Yes, it does, and I just want to take that a bit further.
Okay,
sure. Something we heard from the earlier panelists about integration of information from other countries, for example. Right. Who else is looking at heart sounds, and how would you compare what you're learning against what has already been learned? It's a case of not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
But do you collaborate, therefore, with other entities so that this information is put together as a one source?
Well, CREST is about collaboration. The first C in CREST is collaboration. But essentially, we're all out to look for who's done what, and instead of reinventing the wheel, we would leverage of what's out there. Who else does heart sounds analysis? I'm sorry, I don't have that information right now. Maybe we'll find out as we get there. But if somebody wants to collaborate, I think we'll be at the table looking at how each other would bring value to the table.
And are you working with academic environments for this? Are you doing this work with universities or
Absolutely.
Universities?
Yes, universities will be involved. In fact, in phase 1, it's primarily about collecting the data, but phase 2 is about writing algorithms to identify the not normal data, and that would require academia to come in and to help write algorithms for it.
Gentlemen, are there any comments you would like to add as we come to the final stages of this? Is there anything you'd like to add on this?
You mean on the data? Or?
On data and all that we've talked about this afternoon.
All right, so I think a lot of us, concerned on the data, basically, right? Because of data, it can represent a lot of things, right? A lot of findings. And then, of course, the misuse of data is everywhere, right? So some use the data for commercial value. And then some, of course, for us, we think that, when we talk about privacy, we like to protect our privacy definitely. Example, when we go to a restaurant, right, you need to write your name, your phone number, the first that come out from our mind. If I write my full name and my phone number, what happened when this data leak? Then suddenly tomorrow I will receive 10 calls, right? From the bank, from everywhere, due to this. So there are a lot of people concerned about this. But that's why we need to really be very careful when we're handling data. And now we talk about digital transformations, where data is a fuel, right? Petroleum is no more a fuel, but data is a fuel for us to move further. So I guess definitely government can play a big role on this. How can we come up with a structure to really make sure that PDPA protect us, so that we're willing to share more data, more personal information, that we are comfortable with it, that we are being protected. So I think everyone is actually having this type of talk. So this is actually a big scope that we can discuss of it, but it actually requires a lot of organizations, even the governments, to save protect us. Yeah.
Because a number of the questions that came through were related to data, and particularly facial recognition, it seems to be a hit.
Yeah.
Last question, a very quick question with a single answer is, who is going to regulate that data of facial recognition?
All right. Image of data, right? So you capture the image. I mean, from a phone, everyone can take a photo of everyone else. So we have a smartphone. But then, of course, when you have a photo of somebody else in your phone, whether it is really illegal or illegal, I cannot answer that question definitely. But if we misuse that data, yes, illegal.
But you talked about facial recognition and capturing facial data.
Yep.
Who is going to regulate that? Who is behind the regulations to say, this is what you can do with it, this is what you can't do with it? Because I think that's what worries people most, is you've got all these cameras now capturing faces.
Yep.
Who regulates that?
All right. So
that's an open question, by the way, if anybody wants to answer.
You take an example in China, right? Everywhere. You mean you are walking around the street, there's some camera. Definitely, of course, the big cities, you don't talk about the outskirts. So cameras everywhere. When you just enter the custom, all right? First, they already know that you're entering. You pass through the gate, they know that you're actually passing the train. And then when you switch on your phone, all right, they already detected your locations and how you spend. You go to China, you install the WeChat. They already know that what you've been spending, where at certain time, how much you've been spending. So it's actually collecting a lot of data without you are knowing it. And then they're promoting online shoppings, everything will be online. So they know what pattern, your spending patterns. They know everything about you. In Malaysia, we are not that serious yet, right? So you talk about who should govern, even the face, right? For us, we actually, as ICT integrator, when we deploy those technology to end user, definitely we need to get their concern. They are actually owning all this, not us. So we actually just use technology to help them to move things, to help to solve the problems, right? So we help them to succeed. So that's actually the main role. So we don't own anything. So apart of that, of course, when we doing this type of technology, these type of implementations, a lot of confidential things need to share to us. So that is actually our business technique that we need to protect. But those are,
and I think very deep indeed for all of you. I'm sure we could go on for another couple of hours talking about data. Dr. Zahar, one final word from you, 15 seconds.
All right, I think as we move into this challenging era, we will see that policies are always going to be behind technology, and therefore we need to have a set of good principles for us to move forward.
Okay.
Ethical principles like fairness, safety, security, privacy, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability as we leverage on AI. Thank you.
Well, talking from a company like Microsoft, I'm glad you said that. We look forward to that happening. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panel for their presentations and for being part of these questions. I hope they haven't been too difficult, but whether it's heart sounds, whether it's facial recognition, whether it's commercial value and so on, obviously there are a lot of things that need to be considered. And I hope for those of you viewing this afternoon that you found this valuable and of interest. I've tried to cover the questions that you put through to us, but quite honestly, it needs a lot more time to go into great depth. We would like to round up the afternoon, however. I think there's a final word from Dato Dr. Goh, who I think is going to say something. She is, of course, the Director for Institute of Clinical Research. She's also the organizing chairman. So I think I'm now going to say thank you again to the panel. Thank you, Dr. Zahar. Thank you each of you for being here. Thank you for the audience who you've been watching and listening to what's been presented this afternoon. And may I now hand over to Dato.
Hello all, and welcome back to the final wrap-up for our NCCR 2020. It is a privilege and honor for us, both Dr. Goh and myself, Kalai Perez-Yami, to give the final bit of our words towards the end of our conference. We started this NCCR 2020 with a very interesting topic, a theme. Conference of important diseases.
Very important.
Very important diseases. And the acronym sounded so perfect for the COVID scenario. I'd like to take a little bit of a moment, just walk through the past 3 days. We started with the opening ceremony by our Honorable Minister of Health, Yang Berhormat Hamid Babar. And we were privileged to have a CRC name lecture by our Director General of Health, Dr. Sri Dr. Noor Hisham. And we then focused on some public health priorities. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our WHO representative of this region, Dr. Lo Ying Jacqueline, for her tremendous effort in moderating the session. We had a tremendous response for the Symposium on Technology and AI, and that was something that laid the foundation for Day 2, in which there were certain topics related to strategies and future in healthcare management. And on that account, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Professor Organ from Korea, who shared his expertise in this field. On the issue of AI and technology, again, I'd like to thank Dr. Richard Jones, or Mr. Richard Jones from the UK, who shared his expertise in that field. And on behalf of the presenters, I'd like to thank Dr. Fazila Sheikh Alauddin, who moderated the session. Today, we are back to Day 3, but yesterday too, we had a very interesting symposium on vaccine and trials. We discussed something on vaccine today, and we had Prof. Kiat from Thailand and Professor Marisa from Philippines, who shared their experience in vaccine and trials. And again, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Christopher Lee, who chaired the session. And we just heard from the 2 panelists today on the issue of government policy and regulation and innovation, and also the conversation on digital applications and research in the field of COVID. For that, I'd like to thank Mr. Stuart Park, who chaired the session to perfection, to time, to the end of this conference. On behalf of the scientific committee, as a chair of this particular committee, I owe a huge thanks to the few people behind the scene, mostly those from the Digital Health Research and Innovation Unit, headed by a few names I must mention: Dr. Aizuddin, Dr. Kwan, Dr. Mohan, Dr. everyone. But really, I think they have put in a lot of effort in getting things done. And also to our sponsors, CREST and CRM, and also to the conference secretariat and organizers by Andres Morty. And also to all those behind ICR and with Dr. Goh in the foreground of organizing this conference. I'd like to say that we have had more than 400 every day to about 600 who actually were on the e-platform. This is a tremendous achievement for the first time e-conference by the Institute of Clinical Research. And I think this speaks well for the future. I'm sure we will come back to the same platform, and I'm sure we will have an enjoyable conference for the future. I'd like to hand over to Dr. Goh. Just a little bit of word that she's actually leaving us at the end of this week. I take this moment in time to thank her for her 10 years of service in this particular institute. And for that, we are ever so grateful for her leadership and kindness that she has shown to all of us. Thank you so much as a person here to lead us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kalai. This is the first time we conduct the National Conference of Clinical Research in a virtual manner. And it's actually virtual right in the National Institute of Health, right in our office. This is not any studio or any event manager doing it for us. I must thank the staff of National Institute of Health, especially the ICT department, the sector of ICT, as well as our staff in ICR. Not to forget to mention, CREST has actually given us full support to organize a 3 days virtual conference in a place where it is not quite like a conference setting. And also, none of us have actually organized this before. If we have done any mistakes, if there are any problems in your setup, in your computer or laptop, we apologize for that, and we will certainly improve on that in the future years. But we do miss you, the over 600 delegates. You know, every year I look forward to this NCCR, and this is the 13th years. Almost every year I took part, and I feel the warmth of the presence of the participants, the speakers, the moderators, and we always have late night makan-makan and then going out together and interact. So we may have to change the way we conduct conference in the future, but I sincerely hope COVID-19 will end by next August so that we can meet all of you again in the usual manner, but we may make it a hybrid manner where maybe overseas speakers can still talk to us on virtual. So with that, I want to thank our partner, our co-organizing committee, and most gratitude to our DG, Dr. Sri Nohisham, who was so busy and took an hour to be with us, and also the two Deputy Director General, Dr. Rohaizat and Dr. Chong, and our ex-DDG, Dr. Christopher. So we have a conference of very important disease, and we also have very important people participated in this conference. So with that, we want to thank you and have a good time, and hopefully we'll meet in person next year. Thank you.